Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is laying out his vision for how the social media company uses artificial intelligence.
Recently, the world watched as Jeff Bezos tied the knot with Lauren Sanchez in a lavish ceremony packed with Hollywood's biggest names. But while Bezos is basking in newlywed bliss, it looks like Mark Zuckerberg might be heading in the opposite direction. Rumors have been swirling for a while, and now it seems like there really is trouble in paradise. Because just recently, Mark Zuckerberg's wife, Priscilla Chan, confirmed what we've all been suspecting, and from the looks of it, things are not looking good. The mastermind behind Facebook. When it comes to grand gestures, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't hold back, especially when it comes to his beautiful wife, Priscilla Chan. From designing her wedding ring himself to commissioning a life-sized Roman-style sculpture in her honor, he's done it all. He even recreated a song they both love, with none other than T-Pain, and once dressed up as Benson Boone to surprise her on her birthday. On the outside, they looked like the perfect couple. But Priscilla's recent revelation painted a very different picture. So what's really going on between the two? And why is Priscilla finally speaking out now? Keep watching because the truth behind their relationship might not be what you expected. But before we dive into what Priscilla actually said, we need to rewind all the way back to where it started. To really understand how they got here, we have to first understand who Mark Zuckerberg is and how this all began. Mark Elliott Zuckerberg was born on May 14, 1984, in White Plains, New York. His mother, Karen, was a psychiatrist. His father, Edward, is a dentist. Mark grew up alongside his three sisters, Ariel, Randy, and Donna, in a Reform Jewish household in Dobbs Ferry. Their family roots traced back to Austria, Germany, and Poland, from where their great-grandparents had once emigrated. Mark was always ahead of the curve. He started out at Ardsley High School, but later transferred to the elite Phillips Exeter Academy, where he became captain of the fencing team. But it wasn't sports that defined him, it was code. While most kids were playing video games, Mark was building them. At just 11, he created something called ZuckNet, a messaging system that let computers in his house and his dad's dental office communicate with each other. By the time he was in high school, Mark had already built a music program called the Synapse Media Player. It used machine learning to study a user's listening habits, and it wasn't just a side project. It got posted to Slashdot and even caught the attention of PC Magazine, earning a respectable 3 out of 5 rating. While most kids were trying to survive high school, Mark was casually creating AI-based software before graduation. He even took a college-level computer class at Mercy College while still in high school. So when Mark showed up at Harvard in 2002, he didn't come in quietly. He already had a reputation. A programming prodigy, a tech whiz. He studied both psychology and computer science, lived in Kirkland House, and joined Alpha Epsilon Pi. Even in his second year, he was building tools most people couldn't even imagine. One of his earliest creations was Course Match, a program that let students choose classes based on what their friends were taking. But then came something that would cause a lot more noise. Face Mash. Inspired by Harvard's student photo books, Mark threw together a site over a weekend that let people vote on who was more attractive between two photos. It blew up. Students were obsessed. But it didn't take long for things to spiral. The site overloaded Harvard's network and crashed one of their servers. By Monday morning, the university shut it down. Students were outraged that their photos were used without consent. Mark publicly apologized, but the damage was already done. The campus newspaper called it completely improper. Still, the spark had been lit. The seeds of Facebook and everything that came after were already planted. Building a successful career. While the world might know Mark Zuckerberg as the hoodie-wearing billionaire behind Facebook, There's way more to his story than just a successful app. Before the tech empire, before the lawsuits, and way before the marital drama, Mark was just another college kid with a keyboard. Except, of course, he was anything but ordinary. It all started in January 2004. Tucked inside his Harvard dorm room, Mark was writing the very first lines of code for what would become a global digital revolution. Just a few weeks later, on February 4th, the Facebook launched at thefacebook.com, co-founded with his roommates Eduardo Severin, Andrew McCollum, Dustin Moskovitz, and Chris Hughes. The site was supposed to be a fun little network for students, but it was about to blow up in a way no one expected. The concept wasn't pulled from thin air. At his old prep school, Phillips Exeter Academy, there was a printed student directory called The Facebook. Students would flip through it to connect, crush, and gossip. Mark simply digitized what students were already obsessed with, and people couldn't get enough. But just 6 days after launch, trouble was already knocking. 3 Harvard seniors, Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss and Divya Narendra, claimed that Mark had stolen their idea. They said they had asked him to help them build their own social network, harvardconnection.com, and instead, he ghosted them only to launch his own version. Messy, right? They took their complaints to the Harvard Crimson newspaper. And get this, Mark actually hacked into 2 of the editor's email accounts using login data from the Facebook, trying to stop the story from going public. It didn't work, and the 3 filed a lawsuit, which ended in a $20 million settlement plus 1.2 million Facebook shares. Yep, even back then, Mark was playing hardball. After conquering Harvard, Mark and Cohen expanded to other elite schools like Columbia, NYU, Stanford, and Yale. And in true tech rebel fashion, he dropped out of Harvard during his sophomore year to go all in on the site. He and his team packed up, moved to Palo Alto, California, and leased a small house that doubled as their first office. A startup dream, complete with pizza boxes and beanbags. That summer, they caught the eye of billionaire investor Peter Thiel, who gave them their first big check. Suddenly, Facebook wasn't just a college network. It was a movement. And Mark? He wasn't just building an app. He was rewriting the internet. While Silicon Valley was obsessed with cashing out, Zuckerberg turned down big offers to sell the platform. Why? According to him, it wasn't about money. It was about the mission. He wanted to create an open flow of information for people. In other words, Facebook wasn't just a business, it was a belief system. In 2007, MIT Technology Review named him one of the world's top 35 innovators under 35. Vanity Fair called him the most influential person of the information age in 2010. The man who once hacked his campus newspaper was now the face of a tech revolution. And his motto? Move fast and break things. Literally. Inside Facebook, Mark pushed a hacker culture. He created hackathons, all-night coding marathons fueled by beer, music, and wild ideas. The message was clear. If you could build it in one night, you might just change the world. By 2010, Facebook had hit 500 million users. Zuckerberg told Wired that while they could easily ramp up ads and make more money, that wasn't the point. They were focused on impact, not income. But let's be real, they were still raking in billions. In 2013, Mark launched Internet.org, a mission to bring free internet access to the 5 billion people still offline. The idea was noble, but not everyone bought in, especially in India, where activists accused him of violating net neutrality. Facebook pulled out of the project there in 2016. But Mark didn't stop. He even met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to keep the conversation alive. Oh, and remember when Facebook was banned in China? That didn't stop Zuckerberg either. In 2014, he was spotted charming China's internet czar at Facebook HQ, and even spoke Mandarin during a visit to Tsinghua University. Bold move, especially in a country where Facebook can't even be accessed. Meanwhile, back in the US, Facebook was still dominating. In 2014, Zuckerberg was the keynote speaker at the Mobile World Congress, pushing Facebook's pivot to mobile. He was on a mission to connect every corner of the world, and he wasn't shy about it. But behind the scenes, cracks were beginning to show. In 2013, an unemployed web developer hacked Mark's personal Facebook page. Yep, even the founder wasn't immune, and not long after, the platform would become ground zero for major controversies: data privacy scandals, election interference, misinformation, and algorithm-fueled chaos. But we will get into that in a minute. In 2016, Zuckerberg joined forces with Stephen Hawking and Yuri Milner to launch Breakthrough Starshot, a space project aiming to send tiny spacecraft to Alpha Centauri. Yeah, not just your average CEO hobby. And in 2019, he kicked off a new phase, merging Messenger, Instagram, and WhatsApp into one encrypted system.
The thing that we are trying to do at Facebook is just help people connect and communicate more efficiently.
It was a bold and controversial move to integrate the world's biggest messaging platforms all under one digital roof. Oh, and if you thought he was in it for the cash, think again. Zuckerberg takes a symbolic $1 salary as CEO of Meta Flex. But with all the power he's built and all the headlines he's made, one question still lingers. Is it all starting to crack? Because, while the empire stands tall, the whispers behind closed doors, especially from Priscilla, suggest that the man who connected billions may be struggling to stay connected at home and at work. Mark Zuckerberg's controversial rise, scandal, power, and the cracks in a billion-dollar empire. For the past decade, Mark Zuckerberg has not only overseen one of the most powerful companies in the world, but he's also become the face of a revolution that changed how the world communicates. From the explosive success of Facebook's IPO to Meta's current dominance across platforms like Instagram, WhatsApp, and Threads, Zuckerberg has certainly built an empire. But behind the curtain of influence and innovation lies a troubling series of scandals, ethical failures, and accusations that are slowly eating away at the reputation of the once celebrated tech visionary. And now, with whispers of personal strain between Mark and his wife, Priscilla Chan, making headlines, it seems that the turbulence isn't just behind the boardroom doors. It might be creeping into his home life, too. But to understand where Mark and Priscilla stand today, we need to understand the messy journey that brought them here. Mark Zuckerberg was once known as the young programming genius from New York, the kid who learned basic programming from his father, created a music app called Synapse in high school, and built his own messaging system before even setting foot at Harvard. But it was during his time at the Ivy League institution that Zuckerberg's world truly changed. In 2004, at just 19 years old, Mark launched the Facebook, a social experiment initially built for Harvard students. What started in a dorm room made him a millionaire. But while the company's valuation skyrocketed, so did the ethical dilemmas surrounding it. Zuckerberg's journey to success has been anything but clean. Just days after launching Facebook, Mark faced accusations from fellow Harvard students Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss and Divya Narendra. They claimed he had stolen their idea, HarvardConnection.com, and used it to build a rival. The situation quickly turned into a high-profile lawsuit. Although the case was eventually settled for $65 million in cash and Facebook shares, the damage to Zuckerberg's image was already done. He wasn't just the brainy founder anymore. He was seen as cunning, cold, and willing to cross ethical lines to win. And that pattern didn't stop there. While Facebook grew into a tech juggernaut, it also became a breeding ground for scandals. In 2012, just as Facebook went public, the company secretly conducted a psychological experiment on over 70,000 unknowing users. The study manipulated users' news feeds to see if emotional content could influence their moods. The backlash was fierce. People felt used, violated, and treated like lab rats. Then came the 2016 US presidential election, and with it, one of Facebook's biggest controversies: Cambridge Analytica. It was revealed that Facebook had allowed the British political consulting firm to harvest data from up to 87 million users without their consent. The data was weaponized to manipulate voter behavior and micro-target political messages. Zuckerberg faced a congressional hearing and intense public scrutiny. "We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility," he admitted. But for many, it was too little, too late. Zuckerberg's platform didn't just disrupt industries. It contributed to real-world violence. Facebook's algorithms, designed to maximize engagement, often promoted divisive and inflammatory content. In Myanmar, the spread of hate speech on Facebook played a role in inciting a genocide against the Rohingya Muslim minority. The United Nations directly named Facebook as one of the platforms responsible for the spread of misinformation and incitement. For a company that claimed to connect the world, the consequences of its unchecked growth were catastrophic. But all the controversies didn't end there. Rebranded as Meta in 2021, Zuckerberg promised a future built around the metaverse. But instead of excitement, the pivot raised eyebrows. Billions were poured into VR headsets and virtual real estate, while the platform's core issues remained unsolved. Then came Threads, Instagram's answer to X, formerly Twitter. Almost instantly, Threads became a point of contention between Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Musk accused Meta of stealing trade secrets by hiring former Twitter employees and, allegedly, scraping Twitter user data. Zuckerberg denied all allegations, with Meta claiming none of Threads' engineers ever worked at Twitter. But the public feud between the two billionaires made headlines and further highlighted the messy rivalry between Silicon Valley giants. Zuckerberg has always been notoriously private about his personal life, especially when it comes to his children. But he came under fire for posting a family photo where his daughters' faces were covered with emoji stickers. Many saw this as the ultimate irony. The founder of Facebook, a platform that thrives on users oversharing their lives, was now hiding his own children's identities. Critics called it hypocritical. One comment read, "Even Zuck doesn't trust his platform with his kids." But maybe Zuckerberg knows something the rest of us don't. In another blow to Meta's public image, the company was hit with a $1.3 billion fine for violating EU privacy laws by transferring European data to the US, despite a ban. And then there's the promise to support journalism, a promise Meta hasn't lived up to. In 2019, Zuckerberg pledged $300 million over 3 years to support local news. But in 2023, only $29.9 million had been dispersed. What was meant to be a lifeline for journalism turned into another broken commitment. With all the chaos happening in his business world, it's no wonder that rumors are now swirling about trouble at home. Mark and Priscilla Chan were once seen as the model tech couple. They met in college, built a philanthropic empire, and seemed perfectly aligned. But recent reports suggest Priscilla has been pulling away, and sources close to the couple claim she's grown tired of playing second fiddle to Mark's relentless ambition. Her recent comments, though carefully worded, have ignited speculation. For a woman who's remained so private for so long, the fact that she's speaking now is telling. But before the troubles, Priscilla and Mark were just two college kids who met in the most unimaginable way possible. Mark Zuckerberg, and Priscilla Chan's weird relationship dynamics. Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan first crossed paths at a Harvard frat party, and their love story began in, of all places, a bathroom line. "I'm going to get kicked out in 3 days, so we need to go on a date quickly," Mark told her. Somehow, that line worked. At the time, Zuckerberg was in hot water over launching FaceMash, a prank site that nearly got him expelled. He was packing to leave school when friends threw him a farewell party. The same night, he met Priscilla. While the site didn't lead directly to Facebook, Mark would later say it was the most important thing he built at Harvard. "Without FaceMash, I wouldn't have met Priscilla." But their romance wasn't a smooth ride from day one. In a 2021 interview with CBS Mornings, Chan admitted she had serious doubts after their first date. "There was a major red flag," she said. "He told me, 'I have a take-home midterm, but I'd rather hang out with you.'" To her, that sounded less romantic and more irresponsible. "This guy is going nowhere," she thought at the time. Still, the relationship endured. Chan followed Zuckerberg to Silicon Valley, but not without terms. According to the book Once You're Lucky, Twice You're Good, Chan negotiated a relationship agreement that included weekly date nights and 100 minutes of time together outside of Facebook or his apartment.
Because it's important and we want to improve our services.
Well, you just told
And
me
I
a
think
second ago
that
you studied it, that there was no linkage.
Cold? Maybe. Smart? Absolutely. Therapists say it's actually a great way to protect relationship capital. Zuckerberg himself admitted, "When you're doing a partnership like this, it's important to set aside time for your personal partnership." After nearly a decade of dating, the couple tied the knot in 2012, one day after Facebook's historic IPO. That timing raised a few legal eyebrows. Some speculated the wedding date was strategic, possibly allowing Zuckerberg to keep his newly public stock separate in case of a divorce. But Mark insisted it was pure coincidence. In a 2017 anniversary post, he wrote, "I tried to move things around, but the IPO wouldn't have been ready earlier." He also claimed that even Facebook's CFO didn't know he was about to get married. The ceremony was nothing like a typical billionaire bash. At a time when the average California wedding cost over $32,000, Zuckerberg and Chan spent far less. They hosted it in their backyard in Palo Alto, with takeout from Fuki Sushi and Palo Alto Sol. For dessert, chocolate mice from Burdick. The bride wore a $4,700 Claire Pettibone gown, and in place of a pop diva, Green Day's Billie Joe Armstrong, a friend of Zuckerberg's, performed as a wedding gift. "We wanted a low-key wedding," Zuckerberg wrote. To keep it a surprise, guests were told they were attending a party for Chan's med school graduation. When they arrived, Mark made the real announcement. They were getting married, right then and there. But things didn't exactly quiet down post-nuptials. In 2015, as they prepared to welcome their first daughter, Maxima, Zuckerberg was, of course, multitasking. Chan was in active labor when he handed her a letter. "Does this make sense? Should I move this paragraph up?" he asked. "Honey, we're done," she replied. "The baby is here. The letter is complete." That letter would become the public announcement of the Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative, their philanthropic venture pledging 99% of their Facebook shares to social causes. It launched the same day Max was born. And while Mark was making business moves in the delivery room, Chan helped shape his image as a relatable husband and dad. Still, his eccentricities made that narrative complicated. For example, Chan once joked that Mark used to spend 30 minutes a day talking to their Hungarian sheepdog Beast like a coworker. "He's so smart," she told Today, adding that others had called the dog gifted. Oh, and Beast allegedly ranked just below Facebook on Mark's priority list. Things only got more bizarre as Zuckerberg hit his 40s. The hoodie and jeans tech nerd transformed into a Gen Z-style mogul, sporting baggy shirts, gold chains, and flowing curls. He even teamed up with designer Mike Amiri for a clothing line and released shirts with classical Latin phrases. But while he was busy rebranding his image, Meta's reputation continued to tank. Facebook and Instagram were repeatedly criticized for spreading misinformation and harming users' mental health. In the middle of it all, Zuckerberg picked a public feud with Elon Musk. After launching Threads, a Twitter rival, in 2023, Musk challenged him to a literal cage match. Zuckerberg installed an MMA-style octagon in his backyard. Priscilla, however, was not amused. When Mark texted, "Did you see the octagon I put in the backyard?" she replied, "Yes, I saw it. Mark, I've been working on that grass for 2 years." Naturally, he posted the convo on Instagram with a poll. Save the grass or keep the octagon. And then there's the statue. In 2024, Zuckerberg revealed a 7-foot marble sculpture of Priscilla right inside their home, bringing back the Roman tradition of making sculptures of your wife. He captioned, tagging artist Daniel Arsham. Priscilla's response, "The more of me, the better?" with a heart emoji. While fans found it romantic, critics called it a weird billionaire flex. Art World insiders questioned whether it reflected her or just Mark's vision of her. And let's not forget their tropical controversy. In 2014, the couple started buying land in Kauai. By 2016, Zuckerberg's shell company filed lawsuits to pressure local landowners to sell, sparking backlash. A Change.org petition calling him out for colonizing Hawaii gained over 1 million signatures. Despite donations to local nonprofits and attempts to make peace, the damage to his reputation stuck. One resident told Wired, "The people born and raised here can't afford to live here anymore." Even now, the couple continues building a $270 million compound on the island, complete with an underground bunker. Workers are reportedly under strict NDAs to avoid leaking details. From the outside, it looks less like a vacation home and more like a Bond villain lair. So, while their love story started with awkward flirting in a college bathroom line and a budget-friendly backyard wedding, it's since become something much bigger and way more complicated. The king of grand gesture. Some people surprise their spouses with flowers. Others go all out with vacations or diamonds. But when you're Mark Zuckerberg, romance takes on a whole new definition. One that's 7 feet tall, turquoise and silver, and firmly planted in the front lawn. Yes, this is the same man who once designed a custom Porsche minivan. Not for himself, but for his wife, Priscilla Chan. He explained that while he liked cars, he wasn't interested in building a flashy supercar. Instead, he figured, why not put that creative energy into something sweet for Priscilla? That's how the minivan came to life. For him, the gesture was less about horsepower and more about heart. Mark framed it simply. His version of romance was trying to be creative and showing her some originality. And for those wondering what it's like to receive food deliveries at the Zuckerberg residence, the answer is hilariously practical. He joked that DoorDash drivers now know exactly where to drop the food. Just set it by the sculpture. And what a sculpture it is! Towering, striking, and impossible to miss, it became an overnight internet obsession. When Mark unveiled the massive statue of Priscilla last August, social media did what it does best. Memes flooded every platform. Some compared the statue to a video game avatar. Others joked it was an elaborate apology for some unknown offense. There were even posts telling women to get a man who builds you a statue. But what did Priscilla really think? According to Mark, she wasn't exactly thrilled. He admitted she wasn't that happy with it, calling the idea of having a life-sized version of yourself on the lawn weird. Still, he insisted she was a good sport about it. There wasn't some fairy tale date behind the inspiration. In fact, Mark said Priscilla wasn't really into magical or extravagant gestures. His approach had always been more hands-on. He liked making things tangible, over the top, maybe a little weird, but from the heart. That's what led to the statue. Mark had long admired pop sculptor Daniel Arsham and figured it'd be cool to collaborate on something meaningful. Making a sculpture of himself? Out of the question. That, he said, would be crazy. So Priscilla became, as he put it, the target of my creative energy. Of course, once the statue hit the internet, the memes weren't subtle. One popular theory, that he must have done something horribly wrong and made the sculpture to earn forgiveness. But Mark had a different take. He said everyone had it backward. The statue was the thing he did wrong. He leaned into the absurdity. If he ever really messed up, people should brace themselves for whatever over-the-top apology art he'd come up with next. And yes, he repeated again, Priscilla didn't ask for a statue. She didn't want a statue. It was, by all accounts, a little weird. But even if she didn't love the final result, he believed she appreciated the effort. After all, there were worse things he could be doing with his creativity. When he first posted it, he cheekily captioned it, "Bringing back the Roman tradition of making sculptures of your wife." The internet exploded. One user called it the most billionaire thing to do ever. Another commented, "Wife guy level, advanced." And even Priscilla joined in the fun, dropping into the comments to say, "The more of me, the better." But not everyone thought it was charming. Some experts saw red flags. One psychologist suggested that gestures this big can sometimes be less about love and more about control or distraction. The real question, she said, was whether this came from genuine affection or a need to gain admiration and manage public perception. And then came the human wife era. It started innocently. Well, sort of. Priscilla noticed her husband was using his Oculus headset a lot. Like 14 hours a day. But then it got strange. He started calling her his human wife. One day, after removing the headset, he looked confused and asked if she was his computer spouse or flesh spouse. That moment was enough to rattle anyone. Priscilla had always tolerated his tech obsessions, but even she began to wonder if her husband was slipping into the metaverse a little too hard. Things escalated. That same month, he reportedly referred to their child as digital spawn. Even more bizarre, he asked the kid to confirm he had legs and wasn't just a floating torso, something Meta avatars notoriously struggled with for years. For Priscilla, it wasn't funny anymore. The line between Mark's virtual world and the real one was getting dangerously blurry. Some speculated the growing disconnect in their relationship might have triggered his grander-than-usual gestures like the minivan, the statue, or the music video. Yes, the music video. In 2024, Mark teamed up with none other than T-Pain to recreate the early 2000s club anthem, Get Low. Only this version wasn't anything like the original. Dubbed Z-Pain, the remix was acoustic. Mark on guitar, singing lyrics that frankly were never meant for an acoustic guitar. But to him, it was personal. Mark revealed that Get Low was playing the night he met Priscilla at a college party. Every year, they listened to it on their anniversary. So that year, he thought, why not go further? He reached out to T-Pain and made a full version to commemorate that memory. It was weird, yes, but also, in a way, weirdly sweet. Still, reactions were mixed. Some praised the creativity, others raised eyebrows at what was starting to feel like a pattern. Overcompensation wrapped in romantic packaging. Then came the most shocking rumor of all, that Mark had allegedly tried to engage in a sexual act with a Meta Quest 3 headset and got electrocuted. Priscilla was unavailable for comment. And really, who could blame her? The whole thing feels part sweet, part surreal. On one hand, you've got a man doing everything he can to keep the spark alive, just in his own very Zuckerberg way. But on the other, there's this creeping sense that something's off. Was the statue a grand gesture or a quiet apology? Was the music romantic or just weird? And when your partner starts mixing you up with a digital avatar, where does the real connection go? One thing's clear. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't do love the traditional way. His gestures aren't flowers and chocolate. They're techie, eccentric, and sometimes baffling. The real question now isn't whether Priscilla appreciates the effort. It's whether she can keep up with the blurred reality her husband seems to live in. One headset, one statue, and one awkward love song at a time. But all of this makes you wonder, what has Chan's said about marriage? Working in close quarters with a spouse isn't always smooth sailing, especially when you're not just married, but also among the world's most powerful couples. With a combined net worth of over $50 billion, Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan have built not just a family, but also a massive philanthropic foundation aimed at tackling inequality across the globe. Out in public, they present a solid, united front. But behind the scenes, even they've admitted it's not always picture perfect. Chan, a pediatrician and co-leader of their charitable efforts, once opened up about how intense things can get when two driven people share both a home and a mission.
How do you not bring work home, guys? You work together, you live together?
She described their relationship as complex, saying they constantly challenge each other and push one another to think more deeply. She explained that she often encourages him to consider context and purpose and to seek insight from those already doing the work. It's a dynamic that's both stimulating and, at times, uncomfortable. Still, she made it clear that despite the tough moments, the partnership remains fulfilling. In her words, working together and learning from one another is so fun, even when it's not easy. What do you think about Priscilla and Mark's relationship? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.